So we'll be in Revelation chapter 8, and I know that we have done 0 of the book of Revelation together. So I'll do a really quick catch up for you to get you to where we are in chapter 7. Chapter 8. In chapter 1 is John getting the vision. He's getting told by Jesus about what he is to do and that he is to pen these things. In chapters 2 and 3, he writes to the churches. Those are probably letters that you're familiar with. We quote those a lot. And so he writes to the 7 churches, which were actual churches in that time that John literally penned a letter to and literally mailed the book of Revelation to. When we move on, we see the throne of God in chapter number 4. We see Jesus in chapter number 5 come onto the scene after the rapture. He steps in when no one is worthy to open the scroll, and all of heaven is mourning because they think that no one will ever know what the scroll that is being held by God the Father is. Jesus shows up triumphantly, what I believe after the rapture, with the church behind him, and he comes and he takes the scroll out of the hand of the Father, and on that scroll is 7 seals. And so the next chapter is the opening of the first 6 seals, and that's the 4 horsemen are the first 4 seals, and the next 2 seals deal with the aftermath of those 4 horsemen with wars. Last week on a video, I discussed chapter 7, which takes a pause from those seals and goes into the 144,000. That's probably a number you're familiar with, because if you've ever had that knock on your door from a Jehovah's Witness, you know that that's the number that they share with you. And so I basically was posing the question, can someone come to salvation during the tribulation period? And the answer is yes, they can. And chapter 7 gives us evidence of that, because it displays to us people that die after the beginning of the tribulation. And then we get to chapter 8. Chapter 8 is where we open the final seal. And the final seal just opens 7 trumpets. And you'll see kind of the progression of it. Just to share with you my thoughts, there's different beliefs on end time stuff. We call that study eschatology, which is the study of last things. Many people believe many different things. I'll tell you what I believe, and I believe it's backed by evidence. I believe that Christ will return for his church in what we call the rapture. That term's not in Scripture. Paul calls it the gathering up, but it's just a word that we use to describe that gathering up. Christ will come and he will grab his bride and he will remove her from the situation. The next block that follows is a 7-year period, and we know it's 7 years based off the book of Daniel. And later on in this book, in the Revelation, we'll go and you'll see the 69 weeks and the 70th week. The 70th week is the book of is the tribulation period. That's 7 years. And that's 7 years where God pours his wrath out upon the unregenerated soul. He pours it out on the evil. He pours it out on humans. He allows Satan, within his sovereignty, God's sovereignty, he allows Satan unrestrained access to evil. People are evil in and of themselves, but when evil is allowed to be unleashed, you will see the chaos and devastation. And so we have that time frame unfold. What we are reading now is what's unfolding in that 7-year period. So those first 6 seals, it's the entrance of the Antichrist, war takes place, famine takes place, and you see the aftermath of all those things. Those take place, I believe, over several of those initial years. Then we come to the final seal. And the final seal you're going to see is open up what I believe to be a rapid fire of events that are about to unfold. And so if you'll look with me, be in chapter 8, it's not very long, and so I'm just going to read the whole chapter to you, and then I'll discuss the different things we see and what I believe those to be, and then maybe what others can interpret them as. Chapter 8, verse number 1. When the Lamb opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Then I saw 7 angels who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given to them. And another angel came and he stood at the altar with a golden censer, and he was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints rose before God from the hand of the angel. And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar, and threw it on the earth. And there were pearls and of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Now the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared to blow them. The first angel blew his trumpet, and there followed hail and fire mixed with blood, and these were thrown upon the earth. And a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. The second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. And a third of the sea became blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. The third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of the water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the water because it had been made bitter. The fourth angel blew his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of their light might be darkened. And a third of the day might be kept from shining, and likewise a third of the night. Then I looked, and I heard an eagle cry with a loud voice as it flew directly overhead, "Woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth, at the blast of the other trumpets that the 3 angels are about to blow." So, we open the 7th seal. And the 7th seal actually opens 7 trumpet judgments. So you're going to see the 7th trumpet, as we get to it in a few chapters, will open 7 bowl judgments. And so they are continuously pouring out. And this is the wrath of God. This is God's revenge on sin. This is God's kind of retribution on the martyrs and the blood of the martyrs that's cried out. We've seen 2 scenes leading up to this right here, where martyrs have been crying for God to pour out his vengeance upon the earth. And so this is God's vengeance upon sin and humanity and their rebellious ways. And so God is now pouring this out. And the reality is, it may not seem as though, but it's also one of God's greatest displays of grace, because he is removing sin in this manner. And so the opening of the 7th seal was the 7th trumpet judgments. And each judgment seems to intensify and bring narrower into focus the vengeance of God, and ultimately brings narrower into focus the final return of Christ. This is the return where Christ no longer comes back as the lamb that was slain for our sins. He comes back as the ruler we expect him to be, and we anticipated him to be. And all of the Old Testament looked for him to be, where he came and he restored order to the earth. And this is when he will finally come back. And so we're narrowing our view as to that. Now, know that all the trumpets don't result, know that the 7 trumpets don't result as the 7th seal being open. So they don't open the 7th one and then 7 trumpets. But they could unfold quicker. So the 7 seals, crack one open, this happens. And almost the next seal is a reaction to the first one. And so, for instance, the first horseman that comes in is the Antichrist. He comes riding into town, and we know that he comes in a peaceful way because it talks about him having a bow and no arrows, and that's our interpretation of him coming in peace. I believe you could see something very similar to what we have going on in our world right now as an avenue that could usher him in. Now, I don't believe that is what is unfolding right now. I believe if you go to Matthew 24, you'll understand what's unfolding right now. This is everything that's leading up to Christ's return. But I believe something similar to what we are seeing could usher in someone with all the answers who could come and take ownership and take rule over this global world politics and economic system. He comes in, and then the next thing that follows is a horseman that comes riding in that brings war. And so every seal cracks open has a reaction to the first one. But there's a time period that takes place between them. When the 7th seal is open, there's 7 angels standing by, ready to blow their trumpets. I believe they are going to happen a lot closer together. And you'll see as we go through them, I believe what you're going to watch unfold is a world war that's taking place. And so the book starts with John, and he mentions that there's a half an hour silence in heaven when all of this begins to take place. And as the people in heaven are solemnly worshiping God, I believe it's also this holy hush that's taking place before this heavenly storm of destruction is about to think of it as the calm before the storm. I think there is a reverence that's taking place up there because they understand the magnitude of what's about to unfold. And so John says for 30 minutes there's silence in heaven. And then as the 7 trumpets are preparing, the angel grabs the incense of the saints, and incense even back into the altar times with the high priest. The incense was the way that they offered praise up to God. And they would burn the incense, and they believed the smell from the incense was pleasing to God and will move God in their favor. That's why we see the picture of the prayers of the saints kind of typified as an incense, because of their understanding that it is the prayers of the saints that are moving God, or that they are pleasing to God in this moment. And finally, the prayers of the saints are being acted on as the trumpets of wrath begin unleashing. So like the 7 seals, the trumpets are divided into 2 cycles. You're going to have the first 4 trumpets, and then you're going to have the final 3 trumpets. The first 4 all deal with nature, kind of humanity, things that we control. The final 3 are going to be taking place in the spiritual realm, and they are angel and demonic trumpets that are coming down upon the earth. The first trumpet brings hell and fire. Now John goes into great detail about the judgment, but the lack of details indicate that John was probably watching in amazement as this was unfolding. Now I said this in a preface before we even started the book of Revelation. John is describing to us things that he's never seen before. So if you can imagine, John has to try to relate things to his understanding so that other people can understand it. And so for him, fire coming from the sky or something falling from the sky, the only thing he can relate it to is hell or something in that magnitude. And so that's what John is trying to do. He's trying to paint a picture based off the comparisons of his day. But they didn't have airplanes in his day, and they didn't have nuclear bombs in his day, and they didn't have the weapons of destruction that we have today. And so John is trying to paint a picture for the readers to understand. And so fire and hell rain from heaven, and fire destroys massive areas. Based on my studies, this is me, I'm going to give you my opinion, and then I'll tell you some other opinions on the matter. Based on my opinion, I believe, as I believed, that the fifth seal was a nuclear attack. I also believe that this is a nuclear attack. Something massive has to destroy, seemingly, and isolate an area of 1/3 of the earth. So it's very precise. It's not saying like it's just gradually raining all over the place. How John paints the pictures, there's a very precise target there, that 1/3 of the earth. And so what do we say about the fire and the hell? A nuclear explosion literally rains down fire and ice upon detonation, and it continues to burn. And so in an explosion, in the aftermath of that, it rains down fire miles and miles away from its detonation. It also rains down ice upon people. What I believe John is looking at right here is a nuclear explosion. Things have went south. The Antichrist came in peace, but up and now to this point right here, the Antichrist is no longer quietly leading and trying to manipulate. Excuse me. He is now ready to fulfill the wishes of Satan, who is controlling him in this moment. And so I believe that this is part of what's taking place, is there's a nuclear attack. And John tells us that this nuclear attack, or what I believe to be a nuclear attack, that rains down fire and ice, he says that it destroys 1/3 of all the greenery, the trees. He relates it all. And I think it's important that we understand kind of the aftermath of this. Not only are we talking about the physical destruction of it, but now you're getting ready to talk about the famine destruction from this. You're talking about animals that people are reliant to eat are taken out. The grass and the trees that those animals need to live are gone. And so this is what I believe John's describing. Now, some people would tell you that they believe it's a meteor. Or some would tell you that it would be literally what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah, where God rained down sulfur fire from heaven. I just believe, based on how John describes other things and with what I believe is about to unfold in the next several ones, is that John is trying to describe to us a nuclear attack when he had no words to describe it. And so the best comparison he could use is fire and ice falling down. Now, I was reading a commentary on this, and we get this picture of 7 angels standing with the trumpets, ready to blow it, and the wrath of God released as a result of it. But I read where a commentator had said, it's not unbelievable that these angels could have been standing there from the fall of mankind, ready for God to unleash His wrath and redeem His usurper, Satan, to redeem that back to Him. And I thought, what a cool thing is that these angels could have been standing there from the fall of man, just waiting for God to exact punishment on Satan for what he had done. So, the second trumpet. So the first trumpet, I believe, it's a nuclear attack. Then John goes to the second trumpet. He describes it like a volcano being cast into the ocean. He says it's like a mountain falling from the sky. Again, nuclear war or modern weapons is something unknown to John. But he would be familiar with a volcano because in AD 79 is when the volcano went off that destroyed Pompeii and all those Roman areas right there. And so John would have been familiar with a volcano. And so John may be going, how do I describe to them what's unfolding? It would be like a volcano, which is oozing out fire, is cast into the ocean. The destruction that he describes to me sounds like some sort of bomb, and I believe it's retaliation for what had unfolded with the previous one. And so, in my opinion, interpreting what I read, I believe that there's some sort of nuclear attack that takes place in retaliation. So you've taken out 1/3 of their trees, their animals, their people are in poverty, not counting all the lives that were lost. In retaliation, they've now fired back a nuclear attack. Because remember, it's the Holy Spirit who restrains evil at the moment, but the Holy Spirit takes His hand off of the lawlessness of man and evil is free to reign how it chooses. So when you remove that barrier, there's no conscience within people. Evilness has corrupted their heart. Knowing the effects of a nuclear war is what withholds a lot of our countries from going to nuclear war. They understand that the loss isn't worth the price to pay for a war to enter that way. But remove a conscience from that situation, and I believe a nuclear war has unfolded right here. And a bomb has been casted, and in retaliation they send another one back. And the result of this trumpet is that 1/3 of the sea becomes blood. 1/3 of the creatures which were in the sea that had life are now dead, and 1/3 of the ships are destroyed. Now, 1/3 of the ship destruction, could have been caused by a reaction to the bomb detonating within the sea. It would literally cause a tsunami from wherever it hit. It would be so massive. As a matter of fact, in 1952, the United States decided that they were going to test its first hydrogen bomb by dropping it in the Pacific Ocean, and the explosion was so devastating that it blew away an island that was 1 mile, called, I don't even know how to pronounce it, out of the ocean, and it left a 175-foot deep hole in the ocean floor. And this was just a hydrogen bomb. This wasn't some massive weapon that we have developed today. Something like this is an indication to me of how this can unfold in the second trumpet. So I believe you have a nuclear attack that's now taken out a lot of the land. You have a nuclear attack now that's been a retaliation that's taken out a lot of the ocean life. And so if you're keeping track, we've lost quite a bit of our earth in this attack. And the third trumpet, John describes what appears to be a fallen star burning like a torch. John actually names this star Wormwood, but the name isn't important as into there's literally something that's going to fall from the sky named Wormwood. Wormwood is actually a description. Wormwood was this medicinal herb that they would use if someone had some sort of parasites within their intestines. This very bitter medicinal herb they would eat it and it would force those worms out of their intestines, and so they would use it for that. But the bitterness was almost too much to bear. So what John is trying to say is that it affects the water and it causes pollution within the seawater and the rivers and the others. And it's clear that John is continually trying to explain to us with his first century words things that are unfolding in future events. The description again describes to me a nuclear attack, and wormwood is the description speaking to the bitter radioactive fallout following the nuclear explosion. So the nuclear explosion has left behind this radioactive fallout where the water, the things within the water are literally poisonous. They're bitter. You couldn't even eat them. And wormwood is how he understands the church would best see it. And then the fourth trumpet, and this is the final one of this chapter, is blown, and a third of the sun, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars were smitten, so that a third of them might be darkened, and that day might not shine at all, and that night might be the same way. Now, air pollution is seemingly the description that John is given here, and that is also the after effects of a nuclear attack. When people describe the aftermath of a nuclear attack, what we've read in the last two trumpets are the very results of that, of the radioactive fallout, which pollutes everything, and you can't inhabitate it, you can't eat it, you can't drink it. We also know that it causes such a massive radioactive cloud overhead that it actually darkens it out, where you literally live in complete darkness. No light gets in through that. And what I believe that John is describing here is that John is describing this unfolds. And I want to point out to you that these are not necessarily spaced out. As a matter of fact, from the cadence of how John describes them, we almost get the impression that they're happening back to back to back. They could have been a rapid fire. They could have happened all within several days, and these could be the results of all this unfolding in this nuclear war that I think is happening. And then John describes an eagle or an angel in this moment who's coming through and is crying, "Woe, woe, woe." It's important that there's three woes there because there's three trumpets left. And those are the three most devastating trumpets that will be blown. Each of those woes represents how terrible those trumpets are going to be. Woe is always a prophetic denunciation of doom. Woe unto, and we would see those in prophetic speakings over cities and over people, that they would say woe and it'll be followed with some sort of destructive thing that was to come. And so John is seeing this unfold, and this pronunciation of doom and this triple woe is for these three remaining trumpets. The first four involved the earth and human devastation that was brought about by war and the forces of nature. The next three that come out involve supernatural forces, angels and demons, where the four angels from the Euphrates River are released, and they sting so bad that people beg to die and they won't, and they can't die. It's just devastating what you see, where hundreds of thousands of an army tries to stand against one angel and they don't have any chances. Such a devastating thing that's about to unfold. But those are my thoughts on those first four trumpets. Again, other people have different beliefs. Some people believe that these are things that happen within the earth, as in meteors falling. It's possible. I'm only using what I believe is the evidence that surrounds it to draw the conclusion I have, but that's the belief I have. Let's close. God, thank you for tonight, for the vision that John saw, and God, may we ever continue to be driven towards evangelism. Lord, may we see all that we read in Revelation as the devastating results of your vengeance on sin, and may we be more drawn to those lost, to share with them your good news, to escape the coming wrath. Lord, may we continue to grow in you, grow closer to you. And God, in this unsettling times, Lord, may we just be love and hope for those searching. God, as bitterness and love grows cold in this moment, Lord, may we continue to love and defy any boundaries of that with those in our community. Lord, we lift up Marshall to you, that you would be with him. Lord, we pray that there be nothing from this exposure, that he be okay, and his mother be okay, and Lord, that you just keep him safe and protected from that. Lord, we just thank you for the privilege we have of coming back together. And Lord, we look forward to our time back together on Sunday. May we continue to seek you in those coming days leading into that. And we ask these in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.